it's been a while. I'm sorry about that. Last video I posted was driving this, except I didn't mention that it was my car at the time. And I guess when I got it, which was last October, it's been almost a year now, I felt a little weird in the depths of COVID and the cases surging and it approaching winter, being like, here's my new car. So I kind of didn't say much. A few months later, I posted on Instagram. Another couple months later, I posted a video of me driving it with the exhaust noise, but again, didn't mention that it was my car. It is my car. Like I said, I've had it for about a year now, 2004 Carrera GT, and thought that finally I would actually make a video and show it to you, talk you through it. I hope to make more videos after that, driving the car, actually talking about driving it while I'm driving it. I just got it back from a huge service. It was gone for almost 3 months. I had a pre-purchase inspection done, as you should when you're buying a car like this, and when that came back before I got the car and it had all the items on it, I decided to get it anyway, but I wanted to address those all, and so that's why I took it in for a multi-month service, just to basically get it into tip-top shape, as close to driving out of the dealership in 2004 for the first time. And I think that the tech did a really good job on it. So now it is in good driving form for hopefully the next year till it needs an oil change, but hopefully I don't need to drop the engine out for quite some time, because it was a very major service, and I'll do another video on that. I got some footage while I was actually at the dealership in their service center, being able to take a look at the car when it was totally taken apart, taking up like 3 bays that you would normally work on other cars. So that like the chassis was in one, and then parts were occupying 2 other bays that cars would normally be worked on. So it was very, very taken apart. But anyway, in this, I'm just gonna give you a basic walkthrough of the car. If you're watching this, there's a good chance you've seen other videos on Carrera GT, so I'm not sure how much new information I can really convey to you on it. This one in particular, it's a seal gray car. It's probably hard to tell the difference on film without the cars next to each other. Seal gray versus GT silver metallic. Seal gray is slightly darker. GT silver is the one that most of the Carrera GTs are painted in. It was the most popular color choice. Then you had black, you had Faience yellow, guards red, and then there were also some paint to sample options on a very, very select few. But those, they ask for a lot more money than the ones that were painted in the standard range of colors. This has the terracotta interior, which I think goes really well with it. I was actually looking for a black car for quite some time. I was very close to getting one, ended up backing out. That was like 8 months before I ended up getting this one. And then I ended up finding this one, and even though it wasn't black, it wasn't the ideal spec that I wanted to get. It had 32,000 miles on it at the time, and it's very rare actually to find one of these when it has a lot of mileage on it. Most of them haven't been driven very much. Most of the ones that are for sale have under 5,000 miles, some between 5 and 10,000. It's very rare to find one that has over 30,000 miles, and as someone who actually planned to drive the car, it seems like a bit of a waste of money to pay the premium to get something that has no miles when I'm just gonna end up putting miles on the thing. So this, don't really have to worry about the depreciation, because that's kind of already happened. And also, I got very lucky in the timing of buying it, because last October was kind of right before prices of almost all cars, but these in particular, went sort of parabolic. So fortunately, it helped justify the cost that I spent on the service. That is the most expensive car service I've ever done. And again, we'll go into more of that in the video that I do on it. But I guess I got very lucky with that. And so it's nice to have one of these where you're not worried about the miles. I put on like 1,500 miles so far, and that's not very big a percent increase when it comes to 32,000 to almost 34,000 miles. So it's been a great experience so far. It's been super fun to drive. And I guess let me just take you through this one in particular and show you some of the stuff about it. So, like I said, this car is seal gray over terracotta. Everything is just stock, except for the suspension, which I just had replaced because it needed to be. But it has the standard wheels, no plans to replace them, no plans to change the color of the car. The interior is harder to switch around and stuff, but with these, I guess they're such an icon that it seems like you're doing the car a disservice by changing anything about it. other than, again, the suspension, which I replaced with some KW springs because you can get the lift system to go along with those. And if there is one drawback of this car, it's that it's very, very low. And so I have had one very unpleasant experience of going over a speed bump, clearing it in the front, then I land over the center of the car, and then that didn't feel good. So I decided that because the suspension needed to be replaced anyway, I might as well get something that can lift up. And so the KWs, they lift at both the front and the rear, I think a little more at the front. And I can be a little bit less cautious when it comes to going over speed bumps and stuff like that. So a little bit of quality of life upgrade right there. I still have the original suspension, can still revert it back, although it would need replacement, other than keeping the springs. So, but if I ever offloaded it, which I don't plan to do, you want to keep the original stuff so that the next owner can revert it if they want to do so. Although I would not recommend it. It's nice to have the lift system. Let me pop the engine bay for you, as it is a very pretty thing to look at. Even more so now that we just had it serviced and it's very clean. It was a little bit dirty before. So this, I believe, was Porsche's first ever carbon fiber chassis that they put in a road car. And I just think one of the coolest things is all the carbon fiber bracing structural components inside of the engine bay. It's not something I've ever seen on any other road car, race car, anything. Maybe it exists, I just don't know of it. And it's just a really cool place to look. You can see the KW springs that I put in. You can see like the air reservoirs that actually inflate and deflate the suspension. Has a couple of storage compartments in the side that have it's like a little key that's inserted, and so you can like open them up and take out the toolkit and stuff. I'm not going to bother because I haven't done it and don't want to misplace things, put it in wrong, and then have a toolkit fall out into the engine bay while I'm driving. That wouldn't be real ideal, but it's a cool place to look at, and you can kind of sort of see into it through the grates over the top even when the lid is closed, but you kind of need to open the thing up to get the full experience. For those of you unfamiliar, Carrera GTs use a 5.7 liter V10 that was originally going to be an F1 engine, and that project was scrapped. And then after that, they were like, okay, well, can we repurpose this engine and race it at Le Mans? And then that project ended up being scrapped. And then they had this engine sitting on a shelf somewhere at Porsche and said, hey, can we modify it a little bit and stick it in a road car? And that's what they did. So it's not the exact engine that would have been in the F1 car or the Le Mans car. That's sort of a misconception that people say. It's been tweaked. All road cars have tweaks to engines that were race derived. But I mean, the reason why you get one of these, or at least the reason why I get one of these, is because of how good the exhaust sound. It is, I guess, sort of neck and neck with the Lexus LFA for the greatest sounding road car of all time. And I mean, how do you not be interested in something like that? Well, as someone who's interested in cars. If you're not interested in cars, totally cool. But that's the selling point, is just, it sounds like almost nothing else on the road, except the LFA is similar, another NAV10. And the funny part is, though, the place you want to be is in the car driving behind this, because you don't actually hear it very much when you're inside the cabin. If the roof is on, then you hear like very mechanical noises. I mean, it sounds like you're in a race car of some sort, but unless you go through a tunnel with the roof off, you're not really getting the full experience. And so I'm doing people a service by driving in front of them with this car. They get to enjoy the sounds, and I just get to deal with operating the clutch, which isn't actually as bad as you might think. Another thing you've probably seen before, if you've ever watched videos on these, is taking the roof on and off. The roof does come off. It keeps the lines. It's a very nice little target top. And so you might not even realize, if you're just seeing one on the street, that it does come off, but pops right off with a couple clips, and I'll do it. just in case you haven't seen it, because again, the only way that you get the full experience of the sound is by taking it off, and then you have to find a tunnel, but you do have to take the roof off first. So there's a couple clips just behind the headrests, so you do that, it just pops right off, and it's very, very light. So the roof, just like basically everything else on the car, is made of carbon fiber, and so you might be a little intimidated, like, oh god, is it going to tip me over when I pull the thing off? But nope, it's can't even really do exercises with it, it's so light. The only thing you do have to be mindful of is if you're in a tight space like your garage, you don't want to accidentally hit it on a wall or something like that. All right, so the passenger side comes off first. You open up the front, and it gives you this nice little diagram that shows you what you're supposed to do and how the whole thing is configured. You follow the images. Put the first one in. It's so cool how it fits so nicely. It's so satisfying. And then again, you just follow the diagram in the image, and that's that. And then it closes right over it. You actually, there's some straps that if you were actually gonna drive, you would put over. They go over these like clips and stuff. Since I'm not doing that right now, just close it down. And there you have it. The entire roof fits in the teeny tiny front trunk. Pretty cool. And then you get to experience the full engine note in the tunnel. Okay, so now that we've taken the roof off so that the exposure will actually work when you're filming me sitting in the car, let's go in the car. But first, let me show you the super secret party trick that nobody has ever shown in another Carrera GT video ever before. Wow, look at how wide this door is. Wouldn't it be so cool if you could use some of that space and make a storage compartment? Well, it turns out they thought of that. Wow, and it even comes equipped with a fancy leather Porsche bag. There's another one on the other side, so you can carry your contraband and no one will know that it's there. In the event of a search of your car, they definitely will never have watched a Carrera GT video on YouTube and know that there is in fact a storage compartment there. Cool, great, isn't that awesome? I think it's pretty cool. I haven't personally stored anything in there, but it's good to know that it exists, because you have not that much storage in the front, and zero if you have the roof in it. You may be amused to know that, and this is something I did not know before I took the delivery of the car, that if my legs were even like an inch shorter, I would not be able to drive this thing. So where I have to sit to drive is that's all the way up. And that allows me to comfortably operate the clutch pedal in its full range of motion. Any further back? Nope. I guess maybe you could ask a dealership, hey, can you put additional tracks forward? I don't know if they do it for you. I don't know if they can. I'm kind of close to the steering wheel, a little closer than I normally be, but it's just, I've learned from all the manual transmission cars that I've driven, I just have short legs in comparison to, like, I guess my torso is longer, and so it just means I always have to scoot way up in order to reach the clutch all the way down. Short person struggles, right? At least I don't have to worry about, you know, hitting my head on the roof of any car ever, so there is that. The seats though, which it's kind of funny, are it's a little small for me. I guess I have a pretty wide torso as well. So the bolstering pushes me forward just a little bit. It's still comfortable. They're very much like the GT3 RS seats, but just like the bolstering is a little bit tighter. They're a little bit more skinnier built. But that said, it's still reasonably comfortable over long periods of time. And I guess let's talk about the clutch a little bit, because obviously that's a big point of people's fear and concern when it comes to this car. I'll talk a little bit more about it as I'm actually operating it in a future driving video, where I'll mount some GoPros and actually talk rather than it just being the exhaust. But basically, all you have to know is that it's a teeny tiny clutch with very low inertia, and because of that, when paired with this engine, if you give it any revs whatsoever, I mean, it just flies up the rev range. You can actually over rev the car just by being too aggressive in a neutral, just revving it to listen to the engine, just because of how quickly it revs up. And so because of that, they wanted to make something to where
you wouldn't be able to accidentally destroy and slip the clutch every time you're starting it. Like say you're doing a hill start and you're trying to give some gas as you're letting off the clutch, you would, unless you're at the absolute perfect point in the range of motion, you just burn the clutch out. So they equipped for all the analog stuff in this car, with it being, you know, no stability control, manual transmission, yada yada. The one part that's computerized is the takeoff. So as you lift off the clutch, the ECU determines how much gas to give the car. So even if you're on a hill start, and again, maybe I'll go into this more, maybe try to even put a GoPro inside of the footwell. If you're on a hill start, all you do is you hold the foot on the brake and then you start letting out the clutch, you'll see the revs start to drop in the tach, just a couple hundred or so. And then at that point, you just start to slowly lift off both the brake and the clutch. And even if you're on a hill, it'll go forward. You don't want to give it any gas because the ECU takes care of it for you. Otherwise, you would burn it out, most likely because of how sensitive and low inertia the thing is. So because of the low inertia though, it's really cool that when you press the clutch in when you're changing gears, the revs just immediately plummet. There's no rev hang, which you get in a lot of new cars because there's a lot of inertia. It's a large flywheel and there's some emissions thing about it, but that doesn't come into play here. So you can shift gears as fast as you want. In fact, it's very hard actually on upshifts to be able to catch the revs before they fall too far. So oftentimes when you're shifting, when you let out the clutch, the revs are actually going back up and they're catching up because it plummeted faster than you're actually able to shift gears. And the shifter also it feels very different than any other car I've driven. To be fair, I have not driven a gated manual before, so I can't really compare it to that, but there's much less spring than you get in a lot of other cars, modern ones especially. You're more just, you know, you're sticking it into place and it doesn't just like spring out or spring in really, and there's not much travel to it. It's a very quick motion, which is nice, and the placement of it obviously was done so that you can very quickly go from the shifter to the wheel. Very race car. One of the really cool things that I like is when you start the car up, there's nothing else you do. You turn the key and you go. In so many other cars, you know, you gotta set it into a different driving mode. You've gotta set the seat position to memory. You gotta toggle the radio, connect the Bluetooth. The Bluetooth isn't working. There's all these electronics that you have to deal with. This has a radio that I've never turned on because I feel like there's no need in a car that sounds this good. And other than that, there's no driving modes. You don't really do anything. I guess you can flip up the wing in the back if you want to, which I do because it looks cool when the wing is up. Increases the car's horsepower by about 50. It's 600 horsepower stock. You put that wing up, 650. That's factual. Other than that, the only thing non-stock about the interior has to do with the suspension. In the ashtray, rather than it being a functional ashtray, so I can't smoke in the Carrera GT. Very sad. Why would you ever smoke in this car? Oh my god. It has the button to raise and lower the suspension. So I click that and then up and down. Super cool. I think that about covers it for the inside. Here, let's jump back out and some final thoughts before, you know, next video I'll drive it. You know what, actually, before we go, I should mention the tires, because that's actually kind of an important part that has to do with much discussion on the car. Many people see this obviously as a very dangerous car to drive, and certainly it can be if you're not cautious and you don't respect the fact that it doesn't have stability control. It has traction control, which you can turn off, which doesn't seem like a good idea, at least for me, because I'm just not good enough. But a lot of the danger earlier on was actually in the tire compound. The original tire compound for this car was not super great. And then add on to that, you had owners who didn't necessarily even replace them for 10 plus years. And so you had that double whammy of not the best compound, plus aged out of where they should have been replaced long ago. And that created, when paired with 600 horsepower and no stability control, a pretty dangerous situation. These are new compound as of 2015. I think it is Michelin redesigned specifically for the Carrera GT to address the concerns. And these are also new tires. So they were replaced at the service. And so that means it should be just as safe as any other car if you turned off the stability control. And all you have to do is, you know, if you're coming out of a corner,
don't mash the throttle. Ease into it, which is what you're supposed to do, but I suppose if you don't realize that and you're used to being able to mash the throttle coming out of corners in cars that have computer systems that'll scale back the power for you, then sure, you might get into trouble. It is a more weight balance sensitive car. You can feel that when you're driving it, but as long as you respect it and know your limitations, it's really, you have to know what you are capable of doing, then you should be okay. It's just, you know, the trickiest part of the car is the start and stop clutch operation. Beyond that, it's normal driving, really. Shifting gears, totally normal, other than, you know, you just have to mind how quickly the revs drop, but it's a normal car otherwise, and it's super fun. All right, so I guess wrapping things up, it's just very happy to have been able to get it when I did, obviously. It was very lucky market timing, and I mean, it's a car that's never going to be built again. To have that 10-cylinder naturally aspirated engine paired up with a manual transmission, having that teeny tiny low inertia clutch with no flywheel to where the revs just plummet as soon as you put in the clutch, having a roof that you're able to take off on a cloudier day preferably, and just how incredible the thing sounds. It's not something that's ever going to be reproduced again, and so it's definitely something I see myself keeping for a very long time. Since getting it, I actually I've had no real interest in changing out anything in the garage. I feel like I've reached a configuration where I'm happy with it and probably will be for quite some time. The only potential switch would be updating the GT3 RS to a 992 at some point, but beyond that, this is a long-term keeper. The GT is a long-term keeper. Everything in the garage has GT in it. Carrera GT, Ford GT, GT3 RS. Apparently that's a requirement if it's gonna go in the garage. M2 is parked outside because it's not a GT. And I just, I don't know, I'm very thankful to be able to drive it and enjoy it, and hopefully make some other people excited who see it and listen to it. The funny thing is though, majority of people don't look twice at it because, you know, it's silver. Bright colors attract more attention. But also, like, if you don't know what it is, I think most people just think it's a 911, basically. Maybe a slightly weird looking one, but a 911 nonetheless. And so you more so get photos and thumbs up from people who are like in other Porsches and other enthusiast cars. But it's cool that, you know, the people who know cars, they recognize it for what it is, and I just get to be lucky enough to pilot it around so people can appreciate the engineering, which I had absolutely nothing to do with. So credit to the engineers in building this thing. I'm glad it still exists and is still drivable, and hopefully will be for a very long time to come. And yeah, with that, thanks for watching. Thought I'd do a little intro. We'll do some driving in another video. Like I said, I'll probably do a video talking more in detail about the service and everything that went into bringing it up to being in, I think, pretty prime condition for a 34,000 mile Carrera GT, which might not sound like much for a daily driver commuter, but again, these cars, you don't often see them with that many miles. And kudos to the original owner for somehow, like, the interior is in incredible shape. It's like he levitated in and out every time he got in. There's like no wear on the bolsters. Kind of impressive. Anyway, I could go on for a long time about boring, uninteresting things, but thanks for watching. And that's it. I'll see you next time.